But I found that Mocha works better for detox, and the reason why is because Mocha runs tests synchronously instead of in different threads. And so you can specify for one test, this should be the only test I run, and you'll just run through that. That'll be very important for test-driven development purposes, because you don't want to rerun your whole stream, all of your tests over and over again. So, but to make those changes is very simple. You can check out reactnativetesting.io for instructions. But all you really need to do is just delete out the detox configuration and end-to-end test directory that's already there, and then rerun those instructions. I'll pull them up, nativetesting.io. And let's just hide that toolbar. So yeah, if you go in here, end-to-end test, I've updated the website to say running detox in it are Mocha, and the difference is there, but almost everything is the same. The contents of the test is just the same. Mocha is just the runner that happens under the hood. So that's all there is to that. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to do a little bit of cleanup and preparation work, just a tiny bit on the project before we get going, and then we're going to build our first feature, and we're going to finish it today. So that'll be great. And I see Yes I Boy is saying a request for a next topic. That's great. I have a whole realm of different ways we could go as far as test driving things out. So I'd love to hear your suggestion, and that can kind of guide what can happen when. So the cleanup we're going to do, before I mess with anything else, I'm going to make sure the tests are still running. And I don't have continuous integration set up or anything like that. So it's nice for me to run the test locally here to make sure they work. So let's run yarn test for the component tests and just make sure it passes. It's just good to have a nice starting point that way. And sure enough, it says that one passed. You can see this is still running through just like I said. And we'll do detox test. We're going to use that -r flag I mentioned last time to avoid rebuilding the iOS app itself, just to upload the new JavaScript and test it out. So let's make sure it runs. It pops up the app over on the right-hand side, right up there above me, and it passes. So we're good. So now we can make changes with confidence. So one thing I want to do, the React Native CLI puts your component, your app component, right at the root of the project. That's not great. So what I'm going to do is create a source folder here. And the font size is going to be a little bit smaller this week. The reason why is because the output of detox test is kind of verbose. And so to get it all fitting on the screen well enough, I lowered the font size. Let me know in the chat or in the, send me a message afterwards if you're watching the recording, and let me know if it's too small, and we can adjust that. So I've got the source folder, and I think, let's go ahead and just leave that for now. So I'm going to move the app component into the source folder, and then I'm going to go into my index.js file. I'll keep that at the root of the project. I think that's fine. But now the import of app is going to come from a source/app instead. And from there, all the relative imports we do in the future from app should work just fine. So let's just rerun detox and make sure everything still passes. This is already just a tiny little example of the confidence you can have making changes, because you don't have to manually test things yourself. You can run an automated test to make sure things are still good. So we're still good. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my new branch. Get checkout B, and we'll call this. So what we're gonna do, our app is an app for tracking restaurants and dishes that we eat at the restaurants. And rating them, what's a 5-star meal, what's a 1-star meal. And so our first feature we're going to build is creating a restaurant. So I'm just going to call the branch creating a restaurant. And then on this branch, I'm going to check in these changes. So we've made the changes here. We've moved app and changed index.js. So I'm going to commit it and say... move component into source folder. The last thing I want to do is to clean out the contents of everything to get a nice clean starting point. So in the app.js file, I'm just going to clear out the style sheet entirely. We're going to play fast and loose when it comes to styles this time. And then in the contents, I'm actually just going to return null. The other thing, because I also like to play it fast and loose, we're going to get rid of prop types. We're just going to do whatever we feel, and it's going to be fine. So we'll get a nice clean starting point in our app component here. Looks like we don't need anything from React Native. I'll send a view. How about that? We'll have a view, and that way our import is still in there. All right, so let's retest again to make sure. Actually, our test should fail this time because our assertion in our test will no longer be the case, but we'll just run our test and get it to show us our nice blank white screen, our white canvas. Juddy, hey, thanks for saying hello. Glad you're back again this week. It is morning where you are. Go ahead and tell me in the chat where you're from, what kind of part of the world, if you like. Seems like maybe you're a little bit west of me. This is after 2 p.m. for me. All right, our test failed. And we see here that it's saying it can't find the element with accessibility ID welcome. And that's because we removed all the elements, and so that's fine. What we're going to do is actually clear out this test and start it out. So even with that, let me go ahead. I won't commit it yet. I'll commit it in a second. Okay, so let's write our first test. So when you're thinking about this kind of outside-in test-driven development, what you want to do is to think through the steps a user is going to take and write them out. So I'm going to rename this file, and I'm going to call it Managing Restaurants. And I'm going to call it that because it's good to group functionality together in end-to-end tests. And so we're going to have a few different things around managing restaurants here in the same file. But for right now, we're going to say it should allow creating a restaurant. So let's write out in comments here first what we want to do to create a restaurant. So we're thinking abstractly the steps a user might go through. And so we might say, okay, so a user, we assume we're on some kind of main screen. Click Add Restaurant button. So click some kind of button to get a chance to add a restaurant. Enter restaurant name. I can't really think of anything else we need for a restaurant right now other than the name. The name's the obvious thing that's necessary. And one of the things about this kind of agile approach is to not over-engineer things from the start. Don't think about all the fields you might possibly need for a restaurant, just what's necessary to meet this need for this story, to allow a user to create a restaurant. It's easy for us when we have good test coverage to add and change things around in the future. So we're going to click Add Restaurant button, enter the restaurant name, click Save button of some kind, and then we're going to check to make sure restaurant appears in the list. We have a list of restaurants. You always got to have a list. It's an iOS app. I assume Android apps have lists as well. I don't really know Android. We'll find out. Cool. So this is our steps, and now we're going to go through. We'll take this pseudocode and implement it with real code, one step at a time. We can, if you need to, you can consult the. Also in the show notes, we have the reference for detox documentation. So I've got it over here on my cheater monitor. So I'll just slide it over here. There's the stream, and here's my detox reference that has all the matchers, actions, and expectations. I see a question in there. Do you use any linters? Yes, we set up ESLint linting last week. It may or may not be running right now. Oh, we got trailing spaces. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it's not yet running on the complaining about the fact that the async keyword is working here. But I do use ESLint, and that's really useful, I think. It's just really helpful to get, make sure you're not kind of running into nasty edge cases. All right, so to add a restaurant button, let's get started here. And I'm using my cheater notes here, but you can always check the detox reference if you need to see the steps. So we want to find this add restaurant button. We're going to look up an element, and we use await here because this is an asynchronous operation. Just about all your steps in detox are going to have an await keyword. We're going to look up element by ID. And I mentioned this a bit last time, that ID is a test-specific ID we're going to be able to use. And that way, no matter how much your copy changes or which element type it is, what component type it is changes, you'll still be able to get the element. So we'll say new restaurant button. One of the fun things here about the live stream is you can see how often I misspell restaurant. And then on this button, we're just going to tap on it. Nope. Tap. Cool. So next, we're going to look for this restaurant name. So somehow we're going to display a restaurant name on the screen. We're not worried about that right now, but we need some way to enter this text. I mean, it's going to be a text field. I just don't know how we're going to pop it up on the screen. We'll see. So await element. I'm going to find it by ID again. And I call it restaurant name text field. And then we do type text. And this is actually going to type text in using the software keyboard. I love sushi, so we're going to do sushi place. Nice brand generic. If you own a restaurant and you want to sponsor this live stream, let me know. And I'll put you on here and all your dishes will be rated 5 stars. It'll be great. All right, so we're going to type in this text for this field. And notice we're going to write out the whole test before we run it. And then we're going to build the code out one bit at a time. We're going to click the save button. And of course, as you imagine, that's going to be pretty similar here. I'm going to call it save restaurant button. I'm going to tap on it. And so then this is all our steps to do stuff. Now we're going to check on the screen to make sure we see the results that we expect. And so checking on the screen is the simplest way to make assertions. And so let's say here, actually, there's two things. Well, there's one obvious thing and one a little bit less obvious thing. So let's see. So first, you're going to do expect. We got to find an element. And right now, we just want to find a row in our table that has the text, the name of the sushi restaurant. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull this name out into a variable. Restaurant name. Sushi place. So this is just a regular old JavaScript string variable. We type the text of that restaurant name. And then down here, we're going to look for it. We're going to say element by label restaurant name. So this is going to look at the accessibility label of a restaurant, basically text that is used to be exposed to accessibility, to screen reading. Testing uses that as well. CMCA boy, where are you getting the element function from? You asked. So that's from detox. I'm going to pull it up in the docs here. Yeah, this is less about walking through all the features of the test libraries one bit at a time. And more about kind of showing you the overall flow. But just know that if you go to the detox docs, and these are linked in the show notes, you can look down here. And specifically, you said element function. I think if you walk through the getting started in detox, that'll be listed in there. So element is mentioned on the matcher page here because that's how you're pulling up elements on the screen. Maybe there's a more core documentation page about that. But it's sort of a core, kind of the core function you use to interact with detox. So yeah, check it out. That's great. And again, this stream will give you an idea of how it's used. All right, cool. So we're getting an element by label. So like the label that'll be exposed for our row for reacting to text elements or other elements is going to be equal to the restaurant name. And so we can just look it up by that. And then we can check to be visible. So the way the Detox API works, it's not just checking that something exists, but also that it's visible on the screen within the scroll area and it's not transparent and things like that. So this should do just about everything. There's one other thing that I'm thinking of doing, and this is maybe thinking ahead about the way testing works. Like if I'm flopping back and forth between different screens, I want to make sure that this the editing screen for editing a restaurant is gone. And so really the way I'm thinking about it, I kind of want to make sure that the text field is not there anymore. So I want to say that I expect element by ID restaurant name text field to be not visible. Also notice when I'm using Visual Studio Code, I'm getting some nice autocomplete with methods and stuff like there. That's really nice. So I'm going to make sure that this restaurant name text field that was available to be typed in before is not there anymore. It's just a little nice step to myself to make sure that things get closed out. When I'm doing test-driven development, I like to make sure that there's a test guiding me to every bit of functionality that I have. So I think we're good to go now. We've got our test. It's all going to fail. So the next thing you do after you write an end-to-end test in test-driven development is you run the test and watch it fail. So of course it's going to fail, but that's sort of part of the point. Is like the point was not to build it all out in one fell swoop. The point is to let the test guide us into what to build. And sure enough, they failed. And sure enough, we need to scroll up because detox output is a little bit verbose. And we see here that when it was trying to run the test managing restaurants should allow creating a restaurant, it failed, of course. And as we dig into the kind of complex element matcher here, so there's a lot to this. This is not ideal. Detox is working on simplifying this output. But as we look through here, we can see that we cannot find a UI element, and the matcher it was using to look for it is accessibility ID new restaurant button. So what this is telling us is we need to add a new restaurant button. So the next step in end-to-end testing is to add just enough code, production code, to pass the current test. So we need a new restaurant button. So that's all we're going to build for right now. So I could, in my app component, add the button directly in here in the app component. But we know that not everything is just going to live directly in the app component. And so there's a principle of end-to-end testing called write the code you wish you had. And the idea here is you go ahead and think about the kind of components you want to gradually break your application up into and just write them now as though you had them. And then the errors in the test are going to guide you to implement everything you need to add. So I don't yet want to reach for any navigation library. Probably in a week or two we'll do that. But for right now, I at least know that this screen that's showing the list of the restaurants is going to be a separate component. And so I think I'm just going to return that out of my app component here. So let's say we could keep a wrapper view in there. I think that's nice. I'm going to put parentheses around it and say, so the code I wish I had is restaurant list. We'll call it that. And so, of course, the linter is going to tell us and guide us that we need to import this. So I'm going to import it. Notice I'm also not making any decisions about data storage right now. I want to hold off on that and use just component state for now until such a time that we need something like Redux or MobX. And we'll see where we go. I actually have no idea which of those routes I'm going to go. Maybe y'all can vote on it. Okay, so we're not getting any compilation errors. This file's not here, so I'm sure it's going to fail, but I wouldn't always bother rerunning it, but let me rerun it now just to check and see the error output we get. Okay, so it's going to actually show, I think the test might actually hang here for a while, but clearly in our simulator we see failed to load bundle, unable to resolve module restaurant list from app.js. So the module restaurant list, the file restaurant list is not there, and so we can just add that. And I'm going to try to stick with class components in general, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's just copy over our standard headers. Default class restaurant list extends component. Render method. This time we'll just return null. That's fine. Probably our linter is going to complain about view, although maybe with my linter settings I have it not worrying about unused variables. That might be a thing. Okay, so let's rerun. We've made a bunch of changes. It shouldn't fix the error yet, but let's just rerun the test to make sure this build problem at least went away. Okay, we're back up. Or we don't get a red screen of death, and it's still looking for new restaurant button. So we've written the code we wish we had. We wanted a restaurant list, and now we have it. And so now that's a screen we can put the add restaurant button on. That feels good to me. So let's go ahead and add a wrapping view here. We're going to import a button. Now, to set that accessibility ID, as you might have seen last week, there's a test ID attribute, and we're just going to set that new restaurant button. And now the test is not driving me to specify a title here, but that's something where I feel like it's okay to go ahead and write it, because your tests don't need to worry about labels and stuff like that. And we're definitely not going to be doing any styling today, but I'm going to at least put a title on the button. Add restaurant. Maybe I'll call it new restaurant, since that's what the test ID is. Okay, so we've got a button. This should fix this error. So let's rerun our end-to-end test and see if it does in fact fix that error and what error comes up next. Again, we're writing only enough production code to fix the current error. Well, okay, we see a new restaurant button. It's nice and beautiful there underneath the status bar at the top. And we see we've made it to the next step. Now it's saying it can't find the UI element restaurant name text field. Okay, so we're going to implement that next. We successfully made it past the first step. And also notice, I'm going to totally test drive this out. Sometimes I don't even bother having the simulator up in front of me. So I'm not going to deal with this visual issue now. We'll handle that with refactoring later. Okay, so we want a text field for the sushi place. And I want that to pop up when we tap on the button. So now we're going to get a bit fancier here. We're going to do a modal. And I think I want to write the code I wish I had. I don't think I want to use the React Native modal component directly in the restaurant list. I think I want to create another component. And this is going to give us an opportunity to drill down to component level testing. We're not going to get there right away, but in a little while. I'm going to pull up my little reference over here. So we're going to get a modal. No, not a modal here. At this point, we're going to import our custom component. Add restaurant modal from add restaurant modal. And this time, I'm just going to go ahead and create the import and create the file. Nope. No, what am I doing? We want an add restaurant modal here. And thinking about the UI already, maybe this is cheating. Maybe this is not doing test-driven development by the book. But I do already know that I want, let me look at the API, yeah. So I want a visible property here because I want to hide it until we tap on the button. So let's go ahead and implement that. And you can push back if you're a test-driven development purist and you don't want to do this yet. And this is going to be in the component state. So let's extract that. Let's say state add modal visible. So by default, this is false. Then down in the render method, we're going to extract that from the state. Ooh. There we go. Add modal visible. This dot state. And then add restaurant modal. That add mode is the add modal visible. You know, I'm going to rename that for clarity. is the add modal visible. That's going to be passed in as the visible property there. So that'll allow us to show it once we have the button working. And that might be, I think that's enough right now. That's the only property we know about right now to get it to show. I'm going to add the file for it as well. I'm just going to cheat and like copy and paste this super quick. But I am going to go back to an empty render method to keep it nice and simple and only implement it here what we need to. I'll keep the view in there. Or we're going to do an empty view. All right, so the add restaurant modal is an empty component there, but this should at least pass the test. Oh, yeah, let's just make sure this still builds because we made some changes here. Coming up, it doesn't crash. And then we're still getting the same error. We're still not finding that restaurant name text field. So let's add that text field here. Text input is the name of it, right? Check in, text input, right? We need a test ID for this text input as well. Test ID equals restaurant name text field. Okay, so that should show up. Now, just to make sure this is not already passing, I'm going to rerun. I think the add restaurant modal is going to continue to be not shown. So we're going to need to add functionality when I tap this button to show it. Yeah, and sure enough, the detox is still waiting for that field to appear. Nothing's happening. It's interesting that it's hung here. There we go. All right. Exception failed. Keyboard did not fail after tapping on this element. This is interesting, so I think it might actually see that the element is there. Yeah, it does. Check it out. It might be hard to see on the stream, but we've got a tapping cursor. So the add restaurant modal is actually showing. So this actually makes sense. I did not implement that display flag. If I had been using prop types, I would have known that. So yeah, so this is actually great. I'm glad I did this. This is fortuitous. So before we move on, I want to make sure that it actually fails for the right reason here. We don't want the add restaurant modal showing up yet. So let's go back to restaurant list. Add restaurant modal visible. Okay, so we should have a prop. And we should say here, const is, just call it visible. Yeah. Visible. So if is not visible, return null. We're just not going to render anything if it's not visible. So with this, we should not get the keyboard did not appear error. We should get the error that the component does not exist. That's what we want to see. Yep, and so right away we get an error, restaurant name text field doesn't exist. So now what we can do, do I want to be writing a component test for the add restaurant modal? I think I do. I think that would be great. So let's actually jump into this. I've moved a bit ahead here of this visible functionality. So let's take it back out and let's write a test for this. So once you get past compilation or just elements being present, and you want to actually kind of test drive some of the behavior of your component, that's when it's good to go down to a component level test. But I think I have not really tested the presence of markup before at a component level, so let's hold off on that. The next thing, very soon right now, we're going to be able to get to a component level test, and we'll do that. Hey Juddy, 6 a.m. Saturday. Oh cool, New Zealander. I'm glad you're here, and wow, thanks for getting up so early to join with us. That's really great. That's commitment right there. I will do my best to honor your time that you're spending. Well, sweet. Okay, so to get back to it, we need to get this thing visible. We need to change restaurant list here so when the button is pressed, we do something. And what we're going to do, I'm going to use this show add restaurant modal, and then we're going to make a show add restaurant modal function here. We're going to assign it using a class property arrow function, and then that way it's just going to kind of give us some nice binding automatically. That's very nice. And here we're going to do this set state. Oops. No, is add modal visible true. Cool. Starts at false. When we tap on the button, it should be true. So now we should go back to be getting the error, maybe the error that the keyboard doesn't show up. Let's see here. Yep, and sure enough, if you saw it quickly, you saw the tap. you might be able to see that blinking cursor on there. And then after a few seconds, as we time out, as detox gives up, we see that the keyboard did not appear. So I've been running into this with detox. I need to follow up with the detox team to see. Sometimes the software keyboard does not pop up automatically. It kind of depends. If you've seen it in your manual testing in the simulator, it just depends on whether the simulator is set up to use the hardware keyboard or the software keyboard. So what I found in that case, it can be useful just to manually show the software keyboard and then rerun. So let's see if that works. And gets us past that. So a little bit of flakiness, but it's okay. Yep, and sure enough there, the keyboard showed up and you saw that detox typed in sushi place for us. So we've gotten further now. And so now we see here, we need a save restaurant button. So that's what it's trying to press. So that's very easy to add. Inside our add restaurant modal, we just add a button. I guess we need to import buttons into here. The test ID is save restaurant button. And again, we'll go ahead and give it a title, save restaurant. And again, so notice if we're just adding elements that need to be in there, that's not something that I feel the need to test drive. And so at the unit level, at the component test level, that's just too much coupling. Our end-to-end test will make sure that like the appropriate inputs and stuff like that are there. So I let the end-to-end test drive that. So let's rerun our test now. This should solve that error and take us on to the next situation. We tap new restaurant, tap sushi place. We see save restaurant is there. We tap on that. Oh, and you know what I've noticed? I did not actually implement add restaurant modal as a modal. It's just a view that shows up on the screen. That's really interesting. So we'll consider that for refactoring. So it's not actually a modal right now. We'll come back to that afterwards. Because the test is passing, we're making progress towards getting our test to be green. Let's go ahead and get there before we do any refactoring. Cool. So the next error we get is we cannot find a UI element. We were looking that something was visible, and it's accessibility label sushi place. So basically, we were expecting sushi place to show up on the screen somewhere here, and it doesn't. And luckily, actually, accessibility label doesn't match the fact that sushi place is typed into this text field. That turns out to be really convenient for us because we don't want it to match that right now. We want to look for another element, like probably a flat list element is what we're going to do. Cool. So to get this passing, we need to add this element. So now is where things get a little more complex. We've got content that we've typed into our add restaurant modal component. We need to get it out of there back up to the restaurant list because I want the restaurant list to store the list of all the restaurants and actually output them in a flat list down below. So to do that, now we're going to step down to the component testing because probably what we want to do is to pass in a function into the add restaurant modal component that we can call to pass the state back up to the parent. So to do that, we're going to create a component test. So where is our, yeah, there it is. There's our test folder, components test there. We're going to take this smoke component test that we did, and we're going to replace it. So we no longer need the React Native text component. Instead, we're going to import add restaurant modal from, and I think I can just start with source. See if that's the right path there. We're testing the add restaurant modal in this file. And so what do we want to test? Let's get rid of this. We'll comment it out for the second. We want to confirm, first of all, yeah, I guess really what we want to confirm is that it calls the, so really we want to pass in some kind of on-save action. Calls the on-save handler with the entered text. So really we say, so let's render out this component and see what we need. I'm going to go ahead and put it on a new line just to be nice and clear. So we're going to have an add restaurant modal component. And then we're going to do on save. And what we want to do is actually want to create a spy here. Let's see if I'm trying to remember if I set up sign-on in the application. We did not. All right, so we're going to have to get this installed. So let me, I don't think we need to close out of that. Yarn add sign-on. Oh no, right, of course, we're using Jest. In Jest, mock functions are built in automatically. Cool. So what we're going to do, const handle save, and we're going to call jest.fn. So this creates a Jest mock function that we're going to be able to inspect to see if it was called. So on save, so this is our handle save function. Is there my linter one as comma there? That's interesting, but we'll do it. So cool. So in our real application, we're going to have a real handle save function that we pass into here. But here we have a fake one that we can make assertions against. And so what we want to do is next we want to look into our component. Now let me just do a little more cheating over here to remember how this component test should work. Props value, pause. There we go. Yeah, cool. Okay, sounds good. So what we're saying is we've got an add restaurant modal, and then we want to type into the field. So we say wrapper.findWhere, and I have a little helper function that I created. So if you want to find an element, you can do find where, and you can pass in a function that helps you find it. And so I'm going to paste in this little helper. I think probably I'm going to put this in some more central place. But it says it's a function. It returns a function that says check the props of the component for a test ID prop and see if it's equal to the passed in ID. And so we could do this in line. Find where component is a component where a component props test ID equals, looking for that text field again, restaurant name text field. So we could do this, but instead what we're going to be able to do, because of this helper function, find where test ID is restaurant name text field. So that's just going to make our tests a little bit more readable, kind of like our detox tests. And now I'm going to say simulate change text. So this is interesting. So Enzyme has a different API for doing these things than detox does, and that's okay. We're just working at a bit of a lower level. So I'm going to put some text in here. Let's say message text. We're going to define a variable, hello world. So we're going to simulate changing the text to message text, and then we're going to say wrapper find where test ID equals, and the name of our button is save restaurant button, simulate press. So we're going to simulate a press on the button. So again, this is replicating what we're doing at the component at the end-to-end test level. In our individual component that we're rendering out, we type in this text and then we press the save button. Now what do we expect? At the component level, we're not expecting something to be outputted onto the screen yet. What we're expecting, not expecting that either, what we're expecting is, look at my cheat sheet. Yeah. Expect handle save. Yeah, there we go. Expect handle save to have been called with message text. So this is what we're getting at. Maybe I could have explained it clearly first. What we're saying is we want the function we pass to the onSave handler. When we click save, what we want that to happen is that function is called and we're passed the message text that we typed in. So this component test is defining that. That's the contractor of our component. The input is these user interactions, and the output is this function call. So let's run yarn test to test that. And our enzyme tests are not going to open up in the simulator. They're just going to run directly here. Did it not like the import? Yeah, all right. So let's see here. For now, I can experiment more with this later, but at least let's go up 2 levels. Yeah, I'll do a relative import and see if that works. Okay, so check it out here. So what we're getting here is add restaurant modal calls the onSave handler with the entered text. It's not succeeding, and it says method simulate is only meant to be run on a single node, 0 found instead. And so this is saying that restaurant name text field is not actually found. So that's interesting. That's not what I expected at this point. So, it's probably because of the visible property. So let's handle that for now. Visible. And there's debugging facilities in Enzyme that would allow us to render out the state of the component if we needed that to figure out what was up. But in this case, I think that's what's going on. Cool. So now it says, we expected the mock function to be called with hello world, but it was not called. So now this is what we want to happen at the component level. Our component test is now doing that. And so now we're doing test-driven development at the component level, the lower level. This is like an inner test-driven development loop where we make things red and then we go green and then we jump back up to the end-to-end test level to see if we've gotten there. So what can we do to get this function called? Well, we can call it. Let's get it called first, and then we'll get the right things passed to it. Getting it called is pretty easy. We just need to say on the button on press equals this handle click save. Let's say press. Maybe just handle save. We don't need to get into debates on whether it's clicking or tapping or pressing. Handle save. It's going to be an arrow function again. And then here, what we can do is just go ahead and get the on save. You know, for clarity here in this naming, let's change it. So let's say handle press save button. That just kind of makes it clear the role of this function and the role of the passed in event handler. Okay, this props. So we get the on save handler from this.props, and then we just call it. And again, right now, I'm just trying to solve this problem that it was not called. So that's all I'm going to do, and we'll see if this works. You know what? Actually, we can even run our tests in a watch mode. So check it out here. It says expected mock function to have been called with hello world as argument 1, but it was called with undefined. So we are calling the function now, but not with the right arguments. So I'm going to go back to run my tests with dash watch. This is going to keep the test running. And for enzyme tests, for component tests, I would definitely do this. So as we save changes, it's just going to happen on here. So what do we need to do to take the text that we enter into the text input and pass it to the onSave handler? Well, we're going to need to do what you always do in React, at least the basic level, which is creating a controlled component. So we need some state for the text of that text field. Restaurant name. Start with an empty string. We're going to say the text input, the value is... Oh, let's extract that from the state. This is just the way I prefer to extract stuff from props and state. I think it's really nice. So that's the value. That's going to set the value, but we need to be able to change it as well. So we say, is that on change? Look at my cheat sheet one more time. On change text, yes. On change text. And we're just going to call handle change text. Handle change text. And that's going to take, yeah, text. Makes sense. I get that confused with React for web. Maybe I'm still confused. We'll see if it passes. Set state. And because we don't need the existing state, we're just going to say name. And I'm going to call this restaurant name so that we can just do the shorthand there. So the restaurant name is the key and the value there. So I think this will allow us to change the text in there and then spit it out there. So now our text that we're entering into the text input is available in the state. And then here we can just extract this as well. In the handle press save button, we get the restaurant name and we pass it to the onSave method. So I think this will satisfy it. And actually, as soon as I click save, you saw that it reran. It was faster than I could remember what was going to happen. And it's passing now. The onSave handler is now being called with the entered text. So that's great. So that's some great progress. I guess I could have been making commits as we went, but I didn't think about that. And sometimes it's better just to commit this stuff all at once. So I'm going to quit out of my component test there, and I'm going to step back up to my end-to-end test and see if we've made progress. So let's give it a try. It's running, managing restaurant, typing in, tapping save restaurant. And now we're actually getting an error we didn't get before. So now the add restaurant modal expects an onSave function, but it hasn't gotten one. And I'm not using prop type, so it didn't complain about it. But our test has caught it, and so that's no problem. So now we can just fix this end-to-end error directly by adding a property into here. We say onSave, and we'll say this.handle save restaurant. Let's say handle add restaurant. Nope, that's not right. Okay, we're going to handle add restaurant. And so that's enough to get past this error. So let's rerun and see. We rerun. Well, it's a little bit slow, but it's not too slow. That's why it's good to keep your tests short. Okay, so we don't get a red screen anymore. We get the error. We're back to the error again that's saying that we just can't see the sushi place text on the screen. But what's happening now, though, the progress we've made is now the name of the restaurant should be being passed back to here. So let's type restaurant name. So what can we do to get the restaurant name to appear? I think I want another subcomponent here, and it's going to be the restaurant list. So let's go ahead and write out the code that we wish we had. We'll say import restaurant list. let's say we have a restaurant list here. And actually, you know, before we do this, let's go ahead and type in, save this in our state. Let me delete this out and maybe comment this out. The first step we can do is to save this in our state. So we're going to say restaurants, and we're not going to think too much about our data structure right now. We're just going to save restaurant names. Maybe I'll even just say that to make it clear. It's just going to be an array for right now. So when we add restaurant, we're going to do this.set state, and this time we're going to use the function form of it where we say state. Do we want to extract the state from that? That's right. Yeah, let's do it. So we say we want the existing restaurant names. I'm going to call this new restaurant name. That could help. So we take our restaurant names, and then what we return is new state, where the restaurant names is equal to, we're going to spread restaurant names, and we're going to add the new one at the, let's add the new one at the front. We don't have any features in our app for sorting yet, so we're just going to add the restaurant name at the front. Okay, so this should set up our state. Nothing should still be displayed, but let's just make sure our code doesn't blow up or anything. We'll do that, and then we'll see if we can pass the functionality onto the restaurant list. And if you're a big visual person, how ugly this looked has got to bug you so much. But for me, I'm fine, and I love test-driven development, so I'm just looking at the tests and whether they're passing. All right, so nothing's blowing up, so probably our restaurant name is being saved in the state here properly. So let's see. So let's put our restaurant list back. That's where we want to pass it to. This is the code we wish we had. We wish we had a restaurant list with restaurant names. That's not going to be what we prefer for the long run. Ultimately, we're going to want restaurants. Let's call it restaurant names right now, and then we'll see how much I regret this in the future. Okay, we're going to extract restaurant names from our state as well. We're going to pass that there. And then we're going to make the file so it builds. Oh no, this is the restaurant list screen. I've already called it restaurant list. So I think in light of that, let's go ahead and do the flat list in this component. I think that seems fine, and we can pull it out later. Maybe once we have navigation, the name of this screen will change. This component will change to restaurant screen or something. So let's go ahead and do a flat list. We want that. I'm gonna look up the reference to make sure I don't get anything wrong on the API of it. Okay, so we got our data equals restaurant names. Our key extractor. I gotta look up that API for sure. I'm not in this all day every day, so if you are in React all day every day, you could probably follow this better than me. So item, we're just gonna return item. Actually, that's fine. So yeah, because the item that's being passed to this is just a plain old string. That's going to be the key that identifies the different lists. Yes, that'll cause problems in the future if we have duplicate names, but at some point we'll handle that once we have ID values on the restaurants and stuff like that. And so then render item. And this is going to be nice and simple. Item. Let's just do text. And we need to import text as well. Yeah, so this is just the simplest way we can do it. One of the benefits of test-driven development like this is you don't need to over-design and overthink through your UI. You can build the simplest thing that can possibly work, and then you can refactor it later. Well, this isn't completely blown up, and that's because I still have this restaurant list duplicate import. So let's remove that and try that again. But yeah, so I love being able to just focus on getting it to work, and then later focus on getting it to look right. This is running. We'll see if this works. Okay, we've gotten an error, but we might have gotten farther. All right, confirm that restaurant name text field is not visible. So we've actually passed that assertion. If you remember our assertion, our tests, where are they at? There we go. We've gotten past the point where we confirm the restaurant name is visible, so that's great. But now we also want to make sure the restaurant name text field is not visible. So that's cool. So the way we can do that, that's pretty straightforward as well. We don't need any kind of complex test for that. Really, all we need to do is on the restaurant list, when we're adding a restaurant, in addition to setting the state of the new restaurant names, we also want to set is add modal visible. And we want to set it back to false to hide it. So that should hide the modal. And again, you can see from we don't want to keep this on the screen, at least in this use case. And so I want to hide it. So this should get our screen nice and clean, or at least as clean as this ugly user interface will be for now. So we'll rerun. I think we might be good. We might be done our test. Save restaurant. Now it looks exactly the same because of the way I've displayed things, but this is not a text field. This is actually the text element. It looks like our flat list is only as high as the sushi place element, so that's something we can refactor again next time. But we've got it working. Our component is working, and we can reload our simulator and try it ourselves. Interacting here, this is just running like regular. We tap on new restaurant. We can tap here, steak place, tap save restaurant, and then it's shown in the list. And actually our test isn't running this, but I think we can even add multiple. So, I see here, now that I click on new restaurant again, it doesn't actually clear out the text field because we haven't tested for that. Something else. Cool, and sure enough, something else and steak place are both added. So maybe we want to have a test that we can add multiple things. This says something passed, but then something else failed. So I don't know if it was trying to rerun something. Let's rerun our test real quick here and see if everything's good. Now, of course, Detox is just running our end-to-end test. Runs. It passes. So maybe something weird was going on. I'm not sure. I'll play around with that after the screencast and see what's going on. Let's run our component test as well. We run it, it passes, and we're good. So let's look back over what we've done in the big picture, and then we'll call it a day. We wrote an end-to-end test first that specifies the steps the user is going to take. They're going to type in a field and click save and then check for certain things on the screen. A bunch of the functionality for this we just built out based on the end-to-end test driving it because we didn't really need to write a whole lot in our component test. Oh, I see that I did not rename my component test file. Let me fix that. I'm going to actually rename the file to add restaurant modal. Rerun to make sure it's still passing. So in the add restaurant modal, we didn't unit test every aspect of it. It's not like a snapshot test that's testing all the visual UI, and that's really great because we're going to be changing around the look and feel a lot. What we did is we wanted to test the functionality. What kind of inputs do we get from this component given, or what kind of outputs do we get given the inputs? And we wrote a test that confirmed that when we type and click save, we get the contents of it outputted. We may come back and revisit this component test more to add some more functionality, like maybe clearing out the text field so we can do it again. So that's all we wrote for the test. And you see these are pretty minimal. These end-to-end tests is just kind of identifying elements by ID. And this component test is just specifying a little bit of behavior. We'll see in future weeks how the separation of having both the high-level and low-level test will help. And then for our components, they're really, really simple. Our app continues just to show the restaurant list. The restaurant list just has a tiny bit of state and just the bare minimum components to get this working, while also decomposing into a couple of lower level components. Well, I guess really one custom lower level component for now. And then the add restaurant modal also it's so minimal it's not even a modal yet, which is hilarious. I didn't plan that, but I love it. You probably think I'm crazy, but we're going to see how we can refactor to using a modal in the future next time around. But this is the minimum possible component to get the behavior that we've asked for. And that's awesome. That's really great. And by going ahead and writing the code we wish we have, we've avoided having all these form complexities from cluttering up our restaurant list component. Add restaurant modal handles the controlled component of taking care of the restaurant name. And in the future, it also handles the concern of hiding and showing itself. And so that keeps our restaurant list nice and simpler. The approach of writing the code you wish you had will tend to help with that a lot. So we're done. I'm going to go ahead and commit this. Get restaurant creation working. And that's it for now. I'm not going to... I might go ahead and send up this PR, and we're going to merge it down. That'll just be a good practice to get into every week. Oftentimes, I would go ahead and do refactoring now before submitting it, but you can do it later. Maybe I don't have any design input, and I just decide that I want to have the new restaurant button hiding under the status bar there until I get design input as my protest against the designer. I don't know. So I'll send that PR up into the repo. Again, check the stream notes. You can see the repo where this runs. You can download it and make sure it runs yourself. And you can try hacking on it yourself. You can delete the code or the tests and try re-implementing this yourself. Or try Enzyme or Detox in your production application and see how this helps. It can be harder to add these tools into an existing application, but when we're test driving it from the start, we can keep things very simple. We can add these test ID identifiers to be able to find things easily. It makes it nice and simple. So, as I've been saying, that's it for today for the stream. I think that's enough time. Thank you so much for joining me for this. So what we're going to do next week is, first we're going to do some refactoring on this component. So we're going to handle those issues where the modal is not actually a modal. We're going to handle this issue where the flat list doesn't take up the whole screen. And I think if there's time, I'd actually love to go ahead and drop in a React Native component library. React Native Elements is one that I've really liked because they've got some nice built-in styles for lists that look like native iOS and Android lists. But I'd love to hear what you recommend. Would you recommend Paper, something else? So let me know, and I'll tweet this and ask this as well. Let me know what React Native kind of fancy-looking components library you'd recommend, because I'm not going to get into a lot of fancy component styling. I'd rather use something off the shelf because our focus here is on the functionality, and you don't want me getting into visuals. It's not going to be a good experience. In the future, we've got all kinds of fun stuff we can do. Probably what we're going to do next after that is to handle some component edge cases. We're going to handle making sure the user doesn't submit the form with an empty text field. Maybe that's the main edge case we'll handle. We'll see. We'll handle canceling, being able to get cancel back out of the modal and stuff like that. And that'll be good. And then from the future, we'll add more functionality and then eventually add navigation, storage. It's going to be great. And so I'd love to hear recommendations from anyone on where you want to see this go. Please ask me questions on Twitch chat or on Twitter anytime. I'm coding it wrong on Twitter. Links to that is in the show notes as well. Appreciate you joining me for this. It's been really fun to test drive out this initial feature. And thinking through this, you may say, well, the value of this test-driven development isn't obvious yet. And that's totally makes sense. You could have built this by hand a lot faster. There would have been manual testing, and so I already feel like the ability to rerun these tests quickly is really nice. But as you see just how little manual testing we have to do as we go along, as we refactor, as we add new functionality, as you see the design benefits that our unit tests give us, I think you'll start to see more and more of the benefits that test-driven development can give you for your React Native development. So thanks for joining me. I love this. This is so much fun. Reach out to me on chat or on Twitter anytime. Tell me your experiences in React Native or React Native testing, because I just love thinking about this stuff. Maybe a little too much. It's crazy. So I'd love to talk for you, hear from you. Hit me up on the Reactiflux React Native Discord as well. I'll be happy to chat with you there. Thanks for joining, and I'll catch you soon. See ya. So I gotta find that thanks for watching thing. Bye.